and I will walk with you. Using the stars as guide.
Okay, so I'm just gonna start by saying, like, the intent of like this particular presentation is more geared like towards parents. So my hope is that like what you guys can do is just sort of take what we present to you and sort of like share it with people in the community and share it with your parents and stuff like that, and with the students as well. So hopefully that is kind of the guide. So our goals or objectives would be to support parents and caregivers with information on the importance of a post-secondary education. Now, I am also like with the mindset that not every student like needs to go to college in order to be successful. But this like transition is like in its very early stages of like being a thing where like there's like not really a lot of support out there for students to like come into adulthood in general. So college is sort of like the first like push that students are getting, and that's where like a lot of the resources that are out there right now are like geared towards. So that's kind of what we're going to focus on. Inform the community about funding and obtaining services in college. Anna's going to kind of touch on that. Encourage students to self-advocate for themselves in college and beyond, which can of course like tie back to middle school as well and even in the younger years. Provide resources for additional support at the state and community level. Okay, so this is just a little bit of tidbit about disparity among like millennials right now who like didn't go to college, and you can see that there's just like a really big chunk of the just a bachelor's degree or just a high school graduate versus just a 2-year degree. A lot of students that like Anna and I work with particularly are like somewhere in this range where they're sort of like reaching. This thing is so crazy. We don't really know how to use Prezi, so we're trying. I was like, oh, they look so cool, but like they're kind of crazy and they're weird, and we're trying. So if it gets crazy, just let me know. Like our students typically fall like in this range. Oh, is it because I'm touching it? Yeah. Oh my god. So it's like okay. Yeah, stand over here. All right. I was like, what's going on? All right. So yeah, they're falling. Like a lot of our students are like intending on going to like the city colleges of Chicago. So that's like a big push for us right now. Okay, next circle.
Can you say what school is it that you're at?
We work at a school called Pathways in Education. It's one of the like option schools. So
yeah,
students,
like a lot of our students from here at Uplift.
Yes, we have a lot of students that have mentioned Uplift. A lot of students from this community, particularly.
And is it an alternate high school?
Yeah, so they obtain like a CPS diploma. They come for like a certain amount of time throughout the day. Yeah, but if you guys have specific questions, I'd be more than happy to like touch on that if you want to.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you guys can see this. Might be a little bit more clear in the PowerPoint, like the handout. But typically, like students with disabilities are pretty much just like not really obtaining any sort of like college degree. Like the numbers are just sort of like staggering. So working adults with without disabilities with less than a high school diploma are only at about like 11.5%, and then with disabilities is like 24.8. But then the poverty rate of students with disabilities is 24.6, and without disabilities is only 9.3. So it's like huge gaps. Some college is a little bit higher, but the employment rate also for students with disabilities is only at 38.1, and without disabilities is 78. So that's sort of scary. Okay, so Anna's going to talk about paying for college and go into a couple different resources about like how students in general can pay for college, and then also more specifically about students with disabilities.
Wait, can I go back to the last slide?
Yeah, sure.
Really quick. It looks like the less than high school percentage is just about the same as the poverty percentage.
Yes.
They're both around 24.6.
Right. Yes.
I'm wondering if that is like together, but you probably don't know really.
I don't know
Those are like an overlap. They've got to be.
Yeah, I think it's like an overlapping. I don't know specifically. Like the reason I put this on here was more for like this part up. Do you know what I mean? Because like the median wage is lower, and so is like their poverty rate is much higher. Their employment rate is much lower, and these are for like students who only completed like a high school diploma, if that sort of helps put that chart in perspective. So like even though if you're just like a regular Joe Schmo high school kid who leaves and goes and works at the factory that your uncle got you a sweet job at, right? Like you're still better off than someone who graduated high school with a disability.
Yeah.
Just as soon as just as leaving, even if you're unemployed.
Okay.
So yeah, that helps. Okay.
So in terms of paying for college, the biggest source of support for students, whether they have disabilities or don't, is going to be applying for FAFSA, which for those of you guys who aren't familiar with it, stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It's basically a one-stop shop for all federal and state aid, and colleges also use the FAFSA as kind of a way to determine whether or not students will receive scholarships specific to the school. So it's super important to have students fill this out. So that's something we wanted to stress to parents, and if you have parents who are helping students with this transition, getting them to complete the FAFSA is such an important step. Students who complete the FAFSA are more likely to go on to college, so there's definitely a relationship there. FAFSA provides financial aid, federal financial aid, the Pell Grant, and the Stafford Student Loans, and also the Illinois Math Grant for students. The grants, obviously, you don't have to pay back. They're just money that's gifted to the students, helps them pay for college, and then the loans, obviously, you have to pay back. And that aid is available to any student who graduates from high school and is moving on to college. But there are also some financial aid programs available to students who have intellectual disabilities and haven't received a high school diploma or a GED. And that is available through the Higher Education Opportunity Act, which Jessica will talk a little bit more, and through some programs called Comprehensive Transition Programs. The only one that seems to be available for students in the Chicago area is at Elmhurst College. It's called the ELSA program. And that gives students the opportunity to go to a post-secondary institution, go to school alongside their peers who don't have disabilities, receive training, and get that paid for through FAFSA. So that's a really great resource. There are also some resources available for students to support their independent living as they're in college. So the vocational rehab program through the Department of Human Services is a great resource, both for independent living, and also they can sometimes provide tuition fee waivers, which is a really wonderful resource. So if a student enters the VR program as a high school student and develops educational goals that are linked to employment goals that are linked to training in a post-secondary institution, VR can sometimes pay for that, which is a huge help. It's not financial, it's not need-based, which FAFSA is. So for students who don't qualify for the Pell Grant or for the Illinois Math Grant based on their income, they can still get support through vocational rehab. And then SSI and SSDI offer some support for students for independent living as they're in school. There's also a really great program through SSDI called the PASS program. If you guys aren't familiar with that, it allows students to take their SSI income and put it away to pay for college. So it helps students not only have access to that money, but learn to save and put away for college. So that's a great program. Any questions about that? I think it's a lot of information. So just a couple things to know about FAFSA. I talked about the different kinds of programs already, but the most important thing to know really is for people to apply early. So the application opens in January, and the earlier people apply, the more money they're able to get. And that specifically happens through the Illinois Math Grant. That's a state-administered grant, and there's just a pool of money that's available at the beginning of the year, and once it's gone, it's gone. So typically it runs out by the middle to end of February. So we always encourage students to just apply first thing in January, make sure you get your name in there. As long as you apply early and you select an institution in the state of Illinois in your college selection, you will get that grant. So that's a great resource. It's up to $1,000 typically, which can be a huge help. So just to give kind of a sense of what tuition looks like and how financial aid through FAFSA can support students. I just did a quick comparison of the maximum Pell Grant, which is about $5,700 this year, and what that looks like in comparison to some typical institutions in the city. So obviously you can see Loyola University, a private institution, is going to be the most expensive, and the Pell Grant is going to cover just a small portion of that. Northeastern is a little bit more affordable. They're just under $10,000. So a student who receives the max Pell Grant and the MAP grant can probably cover Northeastern pretty much through grant money. And then the City Colleges of Chicago is the most affordable option for students. You're actually going to receive more financial aid than you're going to need to attend city colleges. So it's very affordable. Students actually get a tuition refund from FAFSA when they attend city colleges, and that can help with cost of living expenses. And you know, FAFSA, the way that they calculate the aid that's going to be awarded, it's a little bit different for every person. It depends on your income. It depends on how many dependents you have. But typically, families who have an income of $30,000 or less are going to get the maximum Pell Grant and are going to get the maximum MAP grant. So you can give families a rough estimate that way. So some other financial supports that are available in addition to federal and state grants are private scholarships. There are some information about websites that you can use to search for scholarships for students on the handouts that we're passing out. And there's a lot of scholarships that are available specifically for students with disabilities, so that's a great resource. The Chicago Star Scholarship is a new resource that supports students who are going to city colleges. If students have a GPA of 3.0 or higher and they don't qualify for the Pell Grant or the MAP Grant, they can receive the Chicago Star Scholarship to attend city colleges for free. So that's a great resource. And then again, Social Security, SSDI, and SSI can provide support both for tuition and for independent living while students are in college. Another resource that I did not put up here and just was thinking about this morning is an organization called Thresholds. They offer a lot of support for students who are transitioning to independent living, both in terms of employment coaching and job placement, but also in terms of offering independent living arrangements for individuals with disabilities. So they have supportive housing, they have independent living. That's a fantastic resource for students who are ready to transition out of high school and be on their own, but not quite able to do that completely independently. So that's a really great resource.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Higher Education Act of 2008. I pretty much didn't know about this until just a couple weeks ago, so I'm learning as well. So if you do have specific questions, I have some places I can point you to if you're not sure, or if there's a weird situation that came up and you don't know where to go or who to talk to. I've attached a source at the bottom, and then there's also sources at the end in our little resource packet that we can hand out to you guys as well. So basically, before this was really enacted, there weren't really any special light bulbs or anything that went off if a student with disabilities applied for college. So what this act allowed for, it allowed them to get Pell Grants, like Anna was talking about earlier, supplemental educational opportunity grants. Again, that's money that they don't have to pay back to anybody. So they're not going into college and amounting a ton of student debt. And then federal work-study programs. So the Higher Education Act also implemented transition and post-secondary programs for students with intellectual disabilities, so TPSID. So basically 23 states across the country have started using these TPSID programs, and there's a million different programs. They're all on the website as well. I got them from the Think College website. Surprise, surprise, none of them are in Illinois. Illinois has not picked up the TPSID yet. First and last, so. But hopefully someday, we'll be able to get something like that. But right now, it's limited. There are individualized supports for students and opportunity to be involved in college experiences with their peers without disabilities. So, like Anna said, the one that we found was the one in Elmhurst, which is a private institution that has its own private program that isn't mandated by Illinois or anything like that. So that's at the Elmhurst College and
that's the one you went to, right?
Yeah, right?
It's in Elmhurst.
It's Elmhurst.
Yeah. You went there, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So yeah, basically that school does it by itself, but no other school is mandated to do that. So that's a little bit about that. So there are some transition programs in place in Illinois, but most of them, the one that I found the most information about was just the Illinois Healthcare Transition Program. It's much more, from what I could gather, it was much more directed towards students with intellectual disabilities who probably the idea is that they wouldn't be able to live independently. They will need something like a nurse or 24-hour care or something like that to continue their education or get support living. So that's sort of where this comes from. Like I said, there's no like really great program like mandated by the state that supports like any student on like say the autism spectrum or something like that who wants to go to college. So this is what we got so far. So I'll give you guys a little bit of information about this. Offers training and resources for medical practices, youth families, and school staff. So like if your a parent says they want like the teachers or like future professors to go and get training for this, they can do that. Project developed tools were created by pediatricians in practice, transition experts, youth and parents, and the remaining resources. So basically, yeah, like the doctors were saying like, let's make sure we get these transitions in place for these people. Validated tools and resources from different partner organizations. It sounded like their partner organizations were more national. So that's helpful, at least it's like research based, but it's not, it doesn't seem to be as, like it doesn't push for the individual as much as some of these other programs I think do that are more nationwide, but it's more support based with no like super strong links between like, if someone were to say like I wanted to be a truck driver, right? Like there's no real links to like their employment or their education. It's more like how can we make sure that like you're able to take care of yourself on a daily basis, which is obviously super important, but doesn't really cover those sort of like post-secondary goals that like students really want to achieve.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're getting there. We're trying. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this part of the presentation was a little bit like it's more for like parents and students. So if I was like a student, I'm in college, now what do I do? So I personally, like as a special education student and soon to be teacher, like I really want my students to practice like self-advocacy. I think you were talking about that in your presentation too, like taking that like really important like initial first step. It's like, holy crap, I don't know how to do this assignment, like what am I going to do if this happens in college, right? So it's defined as speaking up for yourself and taking control of your own life. So how does this pertain to college? There are about a million different ways in which it does. But some of the more broad ways that you can self-advocate for yourself include attending the disability resource centers, accommodations in and outside of class, and maintaining a quality of life. So if that means like getting a job, if that means not getting a job, if that means getting to and from class safely and securely, if that means living in a specific building with specific entrances or something like that. So that's really important too.
Now, disability resource centers means like on your college campus.
Yes, on your college campus, and we're going to go into that as well. If I'm breezing through this, just stop me at any time. So for the parents and for teachers as well, so let's think about how we can support our students during transition. Like we talked about earlier, big participation in writing in attending the IEP meeting. That really develops self-determination and advocacy very early on. So that's really, really important. Developing an understanding of disability. So you want a student to be able to say like, I have ADHD, I know that I'm on like this medication, or I know that I'm not on any medication, here's how I act at certain times of the day, this is what it looks like when I'm having a really hard time doing something. You want them to start being able to like identify different degrees or like components of their disability, because it is part of who they are. Attending workshops that focus on self-determination and advocacy. Again, like that's a big tie-in with the resource centers like at their college. And if a student isn't sure like what college they want to go to, the first trip should be to the Disability Resource Center, or maybe the second trip, but to find out like what they can do to sort of self-advocate for themselves. Explore post-secondary workshops and opportunities. Like I said, further info on these will be given at the end, but it's not just college. So I just want to make sure that it's not, that you guys know it doesn't have to just be like, okay, 4-year university or you're totally screwed. So that's important as well.
I love that slide. I think that's really important. All of those ones. And I was thinking too, I'm just thinking at UIC, I get emails all the time about the career, Office of the Career Services.
Yeah.
They do like resume workshops, all these different workshops that people don't tap into.
Well, and I will get to why I think that it's not being tapped into in just a second. So special topics in self-advocacy. So disclosing disability status to the school and to the student. When you apply for college, you don't have to tell someone that you have a disability. So what happens is, and from the research that we kind of did, is that a lot of students will talk to their professor about midway through, and they're saying, oh my God, I can't do this. I'm having a really hard time, what do I do? And by then it's almost too late, and they sort of kind of get that like learned helplessness sort of like problem where they kind of feel like, oh my gosh, like I couldn't do this in high school and now I can't do this now, right? But it's sort of like a weird catch-22 because the school cannot deny someone entrance into the university because they have a disability, but they're also legally not obligated to ask. So that's where like that self-advocacy component really comes into play. So that's why it's up for the student to go to that disability resource center, say, here's my IEP from the last 10 years. I have A, B, and C. These are the accommodations that I'm going to need when I go to class. So it's really important that they do that.
I didn't know that.
I know. I didn't know that either. It's scary. So, but it kind of makes sense. It's like you don't want them to be discriminated against because they have a disability, but then the school has to play like hands off because they can't, you know, they can't say no to somebody because of their disability. It's very strange. And yeah, contacting the disability service offices on campus. Here's just a little bit more about quality of life. These are just like the most important like components of it, I would say, and they translate really well to going to college. Income that is stable and adequate, medical care, personal care, and other supports necessary to feel and be healthy. Recreational options, friends, and social connections based on mutual respect and value. I mean, I didn't really put a lot of stuff about like the social component into this presentation, but that's something like I'm personally really interested in, is thinking about like how we deny or encourage like social relationships for students with disabilities like in a post-secondary setting. So that's something I'm really interested in. Reliable transportation, safety and security in the surrounding community. So those are all things to keep in mind when and if you decide to sort of like help a student apply for college. Okay, so these are just some accommodations in a college setting. They include but are not limited to, I will not read all of them, but there's like a million different things that they can kind of get to sort of help them go along in college. Like how just, you know, moving from like class to class. Like think about how many skills are just in place for you to go to like night school, you know, or go from like class to class on campus, right? Like there's just so many skills that you need to just make sure that you're like attentive in class and that you are, you know, obtaining all the information, and then you can make a transition to your next class, right? So these are just some of the examples of accommodations that they can include. Something like an early syllabus, if a professor can like give them out earlier for the student to prepare, maybe make a calendar for themselves, you know, something as simple as that. Note takers, readers, interpreters, lab or library assistants. I know at UIC, I used it myself, someone can go to class for you and take notes for you. And like as long as the professor understands that you're like your disability status, you don't have to be there technically, right? Like they can take notes for you and bring them back to you, and then you know that like counts as you participating in class. So that's something a lot of people don't know about. Exam modifications, obviously like extended time, alternate test format, quiet space for testing and stuff like that. Also priority registration, that's a big one as well. So students can pick their classes earlier, say if they fill up or something like that. Because if they need a class to get from building A to building B, but that class is full and now they have to go from building F to building B, you know, so priority registration can be really helpful for students like that as well.
Are schools required to provide all these?
Yes, they are. So, but only if that disability status is given. Like only if the student like goes there and says, here's my IEP, here are my accommodations. I know that I need like A, B, and C. I don't think I need D, E, and F anymore, but I know I'm going to need a quiet place to take my test. Yeah.
Now, this sounds like a stupid question. It's probably not. What document exists after high school that shows a student has a disability?
Nothing.
It's a copy of your own
It's-
IEP
yeah.
test.
From
Yeah.
in high school?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So you like that's the other thing too, is that like you were kind of talking about how like sometimes kids like don't have access to their IEP for whatever reason. Like that's why it's so important that they do, that they keep it documented, and that's why it's like that sort of living draft for them. Because what your IEP should be doing as you're moving towards like post-secondary education is that your goals should start, and your objectives and your accommodations should start reflecting like post-secondary options, whether that's going to school or career or something like that, so that when you do take your copy of your IEP to that disability resource center, they can say, great, we can give you all these different accommodations.
Just another thing to add on to that, disability resource centers, depending on the school, are allowed to ask for supplemental documentation. So they can say the IEP is not enough, you need more documentation. So if, for example, a student has an ADHD diagnosis and you guys have a copy of that diagnosis, a letter from the psychologist or from, whoever, if you can provide that to the student, then they can also have that additional documentation and don't have to worry about going and getting another diagnosis in order to apply at the disability resource center.
I wonder if the psych report too can help.
Yeah.
Not just the IEP, but the psychologist has tested them, basically diagnosing. Because I work at assessment clinic at UIC, and I get a lot of adults calling like, oh my god, I need to be tested, so I have proof that I have a disability and I need accommodations. So I don't know if we could like avoid that by giving them, is the psych report something that would be helpful?
As far as I understand, as long as it's by a qualified professional, so the psych report from the school would be perfect.
Yeah,
And
good.
I know for the voc rehab services you were talking about too, is they do want an updated IQ within the last 3 years.
Okay,
So it's often
good to know.
helpful if the young person has had that testing within the last 3 years.
Good to know. Okay.
So, and I'm sorry, just one additional thing in terms of the exam modifications, particularly if students are going to city colleges, they can actually get modifications and accommodations for the COMPASS test, which places them into their beginning classes, so that's really helpful, and a lot of students don't know that. So students who want to get that really need to be proactive about applying with the Disability Resource Center before they even, very early on in the application process, but that will allow them to get modifications so that they get placed into the appropriate classes and don't have to do those pre-credit classes, which financially doesn't cover.
I've always wondered about the COMPASS test. Like,
Yeah.
is it just extended time, do you know, or is it like more, are there any other
I
accommodations?
believe there are modifications that are available. I don't know exactly what they are. The information that City Colleges provides is not super detailed.
Yeah,
This
I've
is a
tried
new
to-
policy, I guess, in
tried
the
to
last
look
year or
for
two.
Yeah.
But there are supposed to be both time accommodations and other.
I think it's interesting that they provide accommodations without any documentation, because technically IEPs are done at the end of high school, right? Because the goals last until whatever the date is.
Right.
So I wonder how somebody who wasn't provided their accommodations, how they would justify that without any. Do you need a psychologist report?
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Sorry.
No, that's a good point. There's a lot of very strange loopholes when it comes to like, making sure you get your services in college. I think it's crazy, but I think it's good that like that's why self-advocacy is so important, and that's why as of when I started at UIC, I think Dr. Cushing told me there were like 15 transition specialists like in the state of Illinois total.
Wow.
So yeah, like it's a completely just like untapped, like context that like we don't think about in special education. It's like, oh wait a second, like what do they do when they leave high school, right? Like we spend all this time like writing these IEPs and doing these really great things to get these students involved with their like disability, and then we say like good luck, like so.
I believe Melissa's a transition specialist, right?
Yes.
Are you certified?
Oh, nice. Good for you.
I got
Yeah.
certified last year.
Nice.
Yeah, a lot of people don't do it.
Yeah, if you are, I think it's still, from what I remember, but if you are like getting your master's degree in special education, I'm pretty sure you can still go and get the transition, the LBS 2 for free. Like you can get your like a tuition waiver. As far, I think.
The project set.
Yeah, through Project Set.
It's
Yeah.
free.
That's the,
Yeah.
You have to apply to it.
Yeah, you got to apply to it, but
It's a grant funded.
I think it's at the beginning of each school year. Yeah, I have. I'll pass these around too, like a packet of like the resources.
No, you can still do it.
We also made a packet for like a Know Your Rights sheet so that you can hand those to parents as well and to students. So the resource packet is coming around that lists all of the like resource centers in Illinois, like disability resource centers at the universities in Illinois. If you want more, let us know. We'd be happy to get them for you. I just listed a couple resources here. Project Set, obviously. Melissa, you said you're a member, right? That's awesome. I applied just a little bit too late. I was super bummed, but such a great program. Really just kind of helps with like transition. I found a really cool one called Check and Connect at University of Minnesota. They have like this entire program that's just dedicated to like assisting students in transition. It's awesome. So that's on the resource page as well. A lot of the information we got for this particular presentation was from Think College and the National Center on Secondary Education and Transition. So those are both really, really helpful websites if you have parents that are just like, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. I don't know where my kid's going to go to college. I don't even know if they want to. Those are two really great websites to kind of point them in the direction to go. We were going to print out articles and stuff from there, but it's very like website-y. Like it's not really worth like printing off, but we made sure to include it in our resource packet for you guys.
Great.
Any questions? I think there's like a slide where I said any questions.
Annie's got a question.
Go ahead.
So for students who don't want to go into the college setting, are there like vocational programs? I know I've heard of one where kids, there's like a school that is a dual school or has a setup like a dual school, and then the kids, I don't know what the school's called. I know it's in CPS or in Chicago somewhere.
Maybe
where
Vaughn, occupational. Maybe Vaughn.
Maybe
has a
Vaughn.
situation.
That sounds very familiar actually. And then they get to practice like scanning items and stocking shelves and all that stuff. Like, do you know of any like vocational programs like that?
I don't know any. Most of the research that I did was mostly like college-based stuff, but if that's something you want like more information on, I'd be more than happy to start like sending that out to the Speducators network, and we can put that on the website as well, because that's just, I don't know enough about that personally, but
there are
so my
only
short answer is
three. Yeah, there are only three. I don't know if you're just talking about CPS, but three. They call them like specialty schools, where students are placed. You know, if it doesn't seem like a public school, can meet their needs, then they might be put into a specialty school, which often they do have more transitional focus programs.
Yeah.
But
yes,
Sarah.
Yeah, I know of only a couple like. I mean, of course, like the therapeutic day schools, but those are like, one could argue that those are not really the best. Like, that, it's hard for transitioning in those schools just as any other high school, so.
Terrible.
Yeah. Or terrible, or worse. So.
The vocational rehab program is a good resource, and then Thresholds actually, it's not a separate school. I mean, this would still be for a student in a traditional high school, but they have a program called the Balancing Incentives Program. They actually start working with students who have IEPs while they're in high school. They do employment planning, training. They help students interview. They make connections for jobs, and it doesn't have to be oriented towards post-secondary education. It can be for students who are just oriented towards getting trained and then transitioning right into a career. And it's a really well-run program. The coaches that they work with have a small worker-to-client ratio. They're very engaged. They'll come out to your school to provide the services to the students if you're willing to have them come, so that's really helpful.
Great. Yeah. Any other questions? Feel free to take like as many copies as you want. We made many. Yeah. So like take them if you want, like to have them at school or something like that. And I think, did I send them to you?
Yeah, I
These
can post
ones?
them.
Okay.
Not these ones, but send them to me.
We'll send these to you too,
And
so
I'll
we can put
post
them up there.
Cool. Thank you guys. I mean, this was very concrete resources and ideas that are very helpful. So thank you very much.
On a homeward path we go. Knowing our time is nigh. I will walk to be with you.